Chapter 2. Make the most of your time. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Ephesians 5 verse 16. I had 2 official fights in grade school that both lasted under 10 seconds long. I wasn't a physical kid growing up, and my anger rarely got the best of me. Even though I would get into altercations around the neighborhood periodically, I kept my hands to myself unless I was backed against a wall. Having said that, I might have been a novice street fighter in real life, but when it came to Tekken, Mortal Kombat, and Capcom Street Fighter, your boy had a black belt in martial arts. I was a skilled assassin. I played video games a lot as a youngster. I mean, who didn't in the early 2000s? From Madden to 2K to Max Payne, I spent hours upon hours on video games. Along with just about everything else in life, pretty much. I say playing the game in moderation isn't an issue. Video games can quickly become an issue, however, when a person begins to devote too much time to them daily, leaving little to no room to engage in things that actually matter. As I'm writing this book, I'm 30 years of age. From the ages of 12 to about 19, I didn't play games because my older sister pawned my Xbox. It's a long story. But regrettably, at 20 years old, as a newly married man, I decided to purchase the game system again. A sad sight to see is a grown man who's not yet where he should be in life waste his precious time on foolish things that benefit neither him nor his family in the long run. Establishing and improving my credit wasn't a priority of mine, but beating level 4 on Splinter Cell was. Figuring out ways to create long-term revenue generation opportunities wasn't high on my to-do list, but creating a player on NBA Live after work was. From 20 to about 25, I don't even want to consider how many hours, days, weeks, and years I literally wasted playing games. The hardest part in thinking about my lack of maturity around that time is understanding that I gave so much energy, emotion, and most importantly, time to something that gave me nothing in return. If you're serious about being a maxed out man, here's one law that you must have written on the tablet of your very soul. Devote most of your time on this earth to things that have the most value in return. Sounds simple enough, but you would be amazed at the number of men who don't live by this principle. While I was explaining how I threw away my time by playing video games, I could hear you guys chuckling saying, I never had problems with that. I knew better. Well, before you get on your high horse, let's take a closer look. Games may not have been your time waster of choice, but something else most likely was. How many men have thrown away delicate hours on watching television? How many of us are guilty of spending whole days catching up on that Netflix series or devoting our entire weekends to the sports world as we hang with friends at the bar every Friday and Saturday night supporting our teams or our favorite fighters? Time is certainly shamefully used in dead-end relationships. Yes, this goes beyond spending time on activities. There are even people that don't deserve a second of our time. This is not because they are less than us or somehow not important, but rather because of the law I mentioned earlier. Some people take from you without ever pouring into you in return. The old saying comes to mind, I can do bad all by myself, which is typically said when someone in a relationship isn't bringing anything to the table. Obviously, there are cases when we are to serve others without any expectation to receive. I think about raising my children or serving the homeless community, for example, or the elderly, or simply those who might have fallen on hard times and need a shoulder. We are to see our time devoted to those people for what it truly is, and that's service to God. Outside of those exceptions, any person or thing that continues to receive our time, effort, and energy without yielding a return is an unfruitful relationship. Can you imagine the earth bringing forth rain, a farmer cultivating his land and planting seed, but for some reason the ground never produced a harvest? That farmer would be literally wasting his time. That's what it looks like when we give time to dead-end things and relationships. Most things aren't bad in and of themselves. Am I saying that video games are evil? Should you feel guilty about going to that sporting event or watching that series on Hulu? Honestly, you would be the only one in your life equipped to answer. The reason is, it's all about time maximization. You should know the goals you have set for yourself, and more importantly, you should know the call that God has on your life. Every day when we wake up in the morning, we should be aware that the time we were given to live is shorter than the day before, and as a result, we should seek to use our time in the best way possible on a given day. Imagine being in a desert and the only thing you have is a gallon of cold water. In that situation, the water would literally be a representation of your life. You would understand whenever it ran out, your life would surely follow. With that awareness, a wise man would make the best use of the water he had each day. You might drink some ever so often, taking sips and gulps, not down in big amounts on purpose in order to conserve. What you wouldn't do if you were smart is pour some on the ground around you to make a sandcastle. Neither would you use it all to bathe yourself because you didn't like the way you smelled. On the contrary, the value of the gallon of water is in its scarcity. In other words, when you have an abundance of any resource, you and I tend to take it for granted. But when a resource is scarce, we care for it as we should. Think for a second about how people would live, what choices they would make if gasoline was in short supply. What would the world look like if food was scarce around the globe? Unfortunately, in many parts of the earth, that is the reality. How about sunlight? Or God forbid, toilet tissue? Sorry, I had to throw that one in there. You say, of course, people would drastically change how they live their lives day to day if these things I mentioned weren't available in abundance. But I ask you, are you sure about that? Out of all the things I referenced, sunlight, gas, and food, time stands alone as the one thing we lose every day that we can never get back. Furthermore, unlike the gallon of water in the desert analogy, with our time on this earth, we're totally clueless to how much we have. Some of us have a gallon of time left, if you will, while others have a quart or a half pint. The fact that we know it's not unlimited should light a fire inside of us to manage it well. And the fact that we're simply ignorant of the amount we have should do the same. Psalms chapter 90 is the only psalm that's attributed to the prophet Moses. In the passage, he contrasts the infinite, timeless, and eternal God with the finite and temporal, mortal man. Of God, Moses says, 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it's past. Psalms 90 verse 4, speaking to the Creator not being bound inside of time as we are. Of man, however, he says, they are like grass which groweth up. In the morning it flourisheth and groweth up. In the evening it is cut down and withereth. Psalms 90 verse 5 through 6. In simple terms, man is here today and gone tomorrow. This sobering truth causes Moses to plead with God, asking the Lord to show him and his people grace and kindness as he reflected on the limitations that humanity has. I believe when Moses took a step back and examined it all, he seen how the entire human race finds themselves at the mercy of the Ancient of Days. Speaking of time and its value, Moses says something powerful in verse 12. He says, because of all this, teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. To me, it's clear what he's asking the Lord for. He's saying, in light of what we know to be true in regards to the finite nature of humanity, in consideration of the brevity of our earthly lives, help us convert this understanding into wisdom, particularly in how we live and spend our time on a daily basis. Paul famously said in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11, when I was a child, I talked like a child, thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. You see, children lack the understanding of how valuable time is. To them, this life will go on as it has forever. So my 3 kids believe they can watch SpongeBob marathons 24/7 and eat corny dogs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because their time reloads every day anyway. Why not? But as men, we know better. Let's discuss briefly what sort of things should get more of our time as we move throughout life. Above all else, the one thing that should consume our time for sure is the effort of seeing the rule of God established in our own hearts and in our spheres of influence. As godly men, we should have an ambition of seeing Jesus reign supreme in our hearts. Our faith says that we believe Christ will return physically at some point and establish a real kingdom on this earth with all nations and people submitted to him. For us, however, we should be seeking to enthrone him here and now. Jesus said in his Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 that we are to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That's Matthew 6:33. Talk about investing time in things that have the most valuable return. There isn't another endeavor on earth that has promise for this life and the next. The opposite of seeking the rule of God in our lives would be to seek for self-rule. to live our lives independently of our Creator, pursuing our own glory in the process. And sadly, many have chosen this as a way of life. Alexander the Great is one powerful man of many who found out the hard way that adopting a philosophy that glorifies selfish ambition doesn't reward in the end. The ancient Greek king of Macedon basically conquered the known world of his day. He ruled with an iron fist, subduing powerful kingdoms and leaving Greek influence everywhere he went. Sadly, his life was snatched from him at just 32 years of age due to an illness. Just like that, he was swept into eternity. Was his life of conquest impressive to God? I'll let you think about that. But hopefully you see my point. Seeking to establish our own kingdoms in the end is a waste of time, while seeking the establishment and expansion of the kingdom of heaven should be the goal. Investing time in personal development is also highly beneficial. You and I should be in a constant flow of growth from one day to the next. In my opinion, there's really no excuse for being a skillless man. Primarily because many guys I know have abundant knowledge about Michael Jordan statistics or about which albums belong in hip-hop's top 10. I also know men who can tell me the full history of Ford's Mustang in detail. So it's clear to me that learning isn't the issue with men. We just choose to apply our learning to the things that interest us personally. While this isn't evil in itself, as maxed out men, our goal should be to seek out knowledge that can also bring value to others. Put time into learning as much as you can. Focus on learning new skills that can benefit your grandkids in 30 years. And by doing so, you be investing time well. What I've been learning is ultimately relationships are of the greatest value. Intentionally using your time to touch the life of another who consequently can go touch several others because of your contribution is what it's all about. Jesus built personal relationships with 12 individuals. He devoted 3.5 years to his disciples, pouring into them and just doing life with them. Jesus did with 3 years of time what most fail to do with 100 years. He maxed out the time he had on earth, dying around the age of 33 years old. Christ shows us that it's not about the quantity, but the quality of our lives. A wise man said it this way: it's not about the days of your life, but rather the life in your days that counts. I was a milkman for a little over a year, and that job taught me the art of being efficient. Life is all about efficiency. In the mornings, I would view my route and see which stores and schools I would have to deliver to on a particular day. I would analyze that information and know immediately if I was taking a lunch that day or waiting until I got home. Now understand, my company gave me the liberty to take a lunch every single day, but I placed restrictions on myself depending on my workload because I desired to be off by a certain time every day. And I knew if I had 16 stops versus 8, for example, I wouldn't be able to take a lunch and get off in my desired time. So sure, I was free to stop in the middle of my route to eat, but doing so would disturb my efficiency and ultimately prevent me from reaching my goal. Jesus said 2 words that I believe encompass what I'm trying to get across. As the time came closer for him to depart this world, when it came to him traveling to certain places over others, he said, I must go through Samaria. Meaning he cut himself off from going to another place, although he had the liberty to. What we're free to do shouldn't demand our time necessarily, but what we're called to do, our purpose. Jesus chose to invest his time and energy on Samaria because his Father called him to do so. Men who don't know their purpose in life waste time because they don't see anything of value demanding their time. Let's change that today. Do you wake up and say, I must call that school and inquire about their medical program? I must start that business. I must call and forgive my father today. Don't forget, when you know your why or your purpose, that should lead you every day in how you choose to invest your time and energy, not your freedom. You and I are free to sit around and relax all day, but our callings don't give us that luxury. Are you making your life count for anything? When your time is up, will you leave a legacy behind that glorifies God? Or will those around you not even feel the loss because your time on earth was primarily used for yourself? I'm praying as a maxed out man, it's the former for sure. Our children's children are counting on us.